Well, I want to thank Andre for that very entertaining introduction. As he said, I've been supporting him in his politics, and he has been supporting mine for a number of years. And he's now chairman of our Outreach and Recruitment Commission. And so anyone who's interested, as he said, of getting involved, finding a way to serve, we would be happy to engage with you. Ms. Norma Telfer, I must say a special word of gratitude to Norma. We had a conversation at my office in Jamaica in April, and I indicated to Norma that since I became president of the party in November 2020, one of the things I was trying to do was to really strengthen the engagement between the party and Jamaicans around the world. And we had made significant progress in that regard. I'll tell you a bit about that. But we had not had an opportunity, I had not had an opportunity to visit Canada. And of course, Canada is one of the important places where Jamaicans have made their home. And so I want to thank her and the team, and it was a team effort, and for doing everything that has happened to enable me to be here with you and to enable my colleagues, Christopher Henry, young lawyer, and he's a candidate, as has been said, for us in North Central St. Andrew, and Andre Hilton, former MP, and as I said, chairman of our Outreach and Recruitment Commission, and Ms. Peter Gay Ferguson, who works with me at the Office of the Leader of the Opposition, and helps with communications and many other important tasks. So thanks to everyone who has made this happen. And of course, thanks to all of you for being here on a Wednesday evening. I really am very grateful, honored really, that you've felt it fit to come and have this conversation that we'll be having this evening. And the room is pretty much full, standing room only. It's packed, standing room only. And obviously, we feel good about that. So thank you so much for coming. It's really wonderful to be here with you. Jamaica, boy, what a way we love our country. Yeah. And I know some of you have been in Canada for many, many years. Some may have come here more recently. And, Canada is a country that has been very welcoming of Jamaicans over the years. And of course, at the political level, the relationship goes back far. Pierre Trudeau, former Prime Minister, and Michael Manley, former Prime Minister of Jamaica, were very, very close. Yeah. And it was a valuable relationship to Jamaica in those years. And so, for us, there's a special relationship with Canada. I was Minister of Justice in the government of Portia Simpson Miller between 2012 and 2016. And the Canadian government were helping us with the justice reform program we were pushing through. And their support was very valuable to me then as minister. So I do appreciate Canada, and it's a real privilege to be here with you, as I've said, this evening. Jamaica is at a crossroads, I believe. We have gone through a decade of very important progress, change, in certain respects, very important respects. And I'm talking really about the public finances of the country. The country, for various reasons, has developed high levels of debt, and the need to service that debt put real limitations on what any government could do to pursue development of the country. And so the first order of business when Portia Simpson Miller became Prime Minister at the end of 2011, beginning of 2012, was to resolve that and make a fundamental change to that situation. For those of you who are interested in economics, at that time, the debt to GDP ratio, which is a ratio between the total debt of the country and the total value of the country's output in each year, was very, very high. That ratio was 147% of GDP, which was one of the highest in the world and was unsustainable. And under her leadership, with Peter Phillips as Minister of Finance and an IMF program, which was a very challenging program, the process began of turning that around. And it was a national commitment, because the private sector came on board, the trade unions came on board, the entire society recognized how important it was that this be successful and that it last into the future. And it was difficult. We had to run a very tight ship and allocate resources to paying down the debt. And in a sense, you could say that the government of Portia paid the price for that, because we had won by a landslide in 2011. And by 2016, we were voted out, very narrowly, by 1 seat. But I don't regret anything about that period, because it set the future of the country on a more sustainable path. And history will judge her and Dr. Phillips well for the role they played at that time. And part of what was done then was to put into the law of the land certain rules of public financial management. We call them the fiscal rules, to ensure that the course that the country was on would be maintained from one administration to the next until certain key targets had been achieved. And when the new government of the Jamaica Labour Party came in 2016, with due credit to them, they continued the process. And we have reached a point now where our debt is at, I believe it's 72% of GDP, and by the end of this fiscal year in March, it will be anticipated to be at 68%. And so we've really cut our debt as a percentage of the size of the economy in half in less than a decade. And that is internationally regarded as a phenomenal achievement for Jamaica. Can you imagine? Jamaica is one of the poster children, I suppose is the right word, of the IMF because of those achievements. And we did some special things. One of the things that was done was we established a thing called EPOC, the Economic Program Oversight Committee, which was co-chaired by the Governor of the Bank of Jamaica and a leader from the private sector. And their mandate was to monitor and make public the performance of the government in meeting the commitments that had been given. Because the program that we're on involved a lot of sacrifices. Some taxes had to be levied and various other things, belt tightening. And so the deal was we would, as a government, would live up to the commitments that we had made in exchange for the society supporting this difficult program. And that model has again been regarded as best practice now for any country that has to go through serious reforms, serious change to turn some long-standing problems around and make up a better future for the country. So I would say from the standpoint of our public finances, Jamaica is in a good place. You know, our debt has come down dramatically and is continuing to come down further. You know, we have good reserves which were built up over that period, foreign exchange reserves. We manage our monetary side of things well. The Bank of Jamaica has done a pretty good job of trying to maintain inflation in the country and all of that. Yet, the country has serious problems, serious challenges that we're facing, and challenges that people are facing, everyday ordinary Jamaican people are facing. And that is a dilemma that we are in. Because despite all the sacrifices that have been made over this period and from before too, we are not yet seeing and feeling the benefits of those sacrifices. And people are frustrated. And I'm going to kind of outline to you what some of what I regard as the more serious problems of the country are at the moment and how we would approach them when we form government, which I believe will be quite soon.
That's right.
Yeah. So, first of all, in order to take the economy to the next level so that it can generate wealth for our people, we have to have a productive economy. And that means we have to have a skilled workforce that can support investments in high value added activities. Right now, our economy has been characterized as being basically low wages, low tech, and low growth. Because we do have a low growth economy. Jamaican economy has not grown at any appreciable rates for far too long. And so dealing with that means we have to deal with our human capital, our people and their capacity. And the education system has been letting us down as a nation. The data that we have, and this has been studied by independent, reputable experts, indicates that over 30% of primary school children, when they leave primary school, can't read and write, can't do basic mathematics, arithmetic, and their ability to understand written material is very limited. Now, that's a serious problem, over 30%, because the effect of that is that they enter high school, they enter secondary school without the basics in place. And they go through that system without being able to cope with the curriculum of secondary school. So they leave school ultimately without any subjects or anything to show for it. Only 18% of our secondary school leavers have 5 CSEC subjects, which is O levels, CXC subject, which is basically the exams you take, what we call fifth form, or traditionally. Only 18% get the 5 subjects, including English and maths, which is the basic standard required to go on to tertiary study. And that's a very low percentage. So I believe that solving that issue is the #1 priority for Jamaica now. I believe that. Because what happens is those youngsters who leave school and haven't got anything to show for it, their prospects are not great. And many of them are very bright. And the reasons why they haven't studied or learned well is not really because they're not able to, but they've had, from they were small, they haven't had the right nurturing care and environmental support to enable them to move forward in life. So many of them end up going into the kind of behaviors that I'm sure many of you are aware of. You know, we have a lot of problems with crime and violence in the country. And that pipeline is fed, I believe, by the school system not delivering a broad standard that lifts the vast majority of our children to the level where they can move forward through the kind of opportunities that exist for people who have an education. The problems in the primary school are multifaceted. Nutrition issues, children going to school hungry. You know, they're not getting fed. And what they get sometimes at school is not nutritious food. You know, they have weak family structures, too many single parent families as a result of teenage pregnancies. The social environment in some of the communities is not conducive to having the values and attitudes that can take you forward in a productive direction. So for me, a critical issue is making the necessary investments in early childhood and primary school so that 30+% is eliminated and all children leaving primary school are literate and numerate, save and except those who have special needs, and we must take care of them as well. And I think if we can solve that, then the generations going into secondary school will be able to cope with the secondary school education. They will get the subjects they need, and they become very trainable, and we can start to attract the investments in higher value added activities that could create better jobs, better paying jobs, and where people no longer have as their main aspiration in life to migrate to North America or wherever, because Jamaica will be a country where they can make a good life for themselves and their families. So that's a critical thing. And I realize for many of you and others living outside Jamaica who would like to return to Jamaica, maybe permanently or at least to spend a good amount of your time there, the healthcare system is a big concern. Big concern, yeah. 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 And the truth is that the healthcare system does have tremendous challenges, especially the public health system in particular. We know that people who go to hospital and they're in need of care often have to wait long periods of time to get admitted. It can be days. They may have to sit on a bench or in a wheelchair, sometimes even on the floor, and it is a degrading experience for them. And we must do better. The interface between the customer, the patient, and the public health system has to be improved and better managed. We have a real problem with maintenance of equipment in our health system. There's so much equipment and machinery in Jamaican public health systems that are not working because they're not being properly maintained. And in fact, I would say Jamaica generally has a maintenance problem. Maintenance, yeah. Whether you're talking about equipment and machinery in the health system, or you're talking about public buildings, or you're talking about the road network. And I don't know how recently you all have been down to JA and driven. Yeah, but the road network is a problem. So I believe that we must focus much more on maintaining our assets than we do. We have gone through a few decades of expansion of roads, building highways. Those have been good investments, important investments. And I applaud the leaders from before who delivered those to the country. But I do think that we need a period now where we start to focus on the rehabilitation and maintenance of the roads that ordinary Jamaicans drive on day to day. These are roads in schemes, housing schemes, roads in the interiors of the island which are in deplorable condition. I mean, I was in I had a busy weekend last weekend. I won't tell you the amount of places I had to go to, but I was driving from Mandeville to Brownstown in the evening. And I passed a spot where there was a banana tree growing in the middle of the road. and let me tell you, the banana tree was flourishing. It was very healthy, But it was in the middle of the road, and they planted it there just as I think to just show the public and to create a little bit of excitement over it, But I mean, that road was absolutely deplorable. And gosh, the roads in Trelawney, in St. Mary, Westmoreland, every parish, because there's none where you could say the roads are in a decent condition. So I really believe that we need to focus on and have a period of, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time because there's a lot of road network to fix. But if we focus on that over a period of years, and we must manage that in a way that ensures transparency and that ensures that the public funds are used efficiently, because there is a lot of waste of one kind or another in how these monies have been spent over the years. So, and the hospital system, we have excellent doctors and nurses in Jamaica. I think everybody would accept that. And many of us have come abroad, and they're in tremendous demand all over the world because they're so good. But the facilities that they have to work with are often not sufficiently looked after and maintained. And the terms and conditions that they have to work in terms of their salaries and so on need some attention as well. And the current government has adopted a policy of outsourcing a lot of the diagnostic work. So rather than grasp the nettle, as they would say, and ensure that the diagnostic equipment is maintained and is functioning in the public health system, they send the patients to the private sector. Now that's very, very costly for the public health sector, to the extent that those costs are absorbed, and some of them are not absorbed and are passed on to patients, many of whom can't afford it. So if you get sick in Jamaica now and you don't have resources, it's a very difficult situation that you face. So I would say part of what the government of the country has to do, having really spent a decade solving the public financial situation, is now fixing the social situation in the country the important amenities that deliver a life that is decent and which people can feel that this is worth being part of. And that's education and healthcare are obviously two critical components of that. Another issue I think you probably have heard about and have concerns about is the situation of crime and violence in the country. Now, that is not a new problem. That is a problem which has been with us for far too long. But it has gotten worse over the years. And I must say, that the approach that the current government has taken to it, I think, has not delivered results. So that, and it's shown in the statistics, because in the 8 years that they have been in power, for most of those years, if you look at, for example, murders in the country, the rates have been elevated way higher than they were in the preceding 4 years that we were in government. Our approach to it was different. We looked at it as an issue, almost like a public health issue, where you have to look at the causes of the problem and address the causes while you're tackling the issue itself in terms of responding to crime and violence. You can't just, the current government's approach has been primarily up to now. I think they're rethinking it now because they realize that the approach they've taken has not worked well. But for the last 8 years, they've essentially said things like the Peace Management Initiative, which was started previously, the Unite for Change, and I'll tell you a bit about what those two programs are. They basically defunded and abandoned those programs and said, we're going to invest in strengthening the police, strengthening the army more so than the police. They've invested heavily in the JDF, and both from the capital point of view and expanding the number of soldiers. And they have tried to deal with the crime problems through states of emergency. Now, we have said states of emergency exist in the Constitution to deal with extreme events that are threatening the continuation of the political order, the state. It is not a policing tool. And you don't need to use it as a policing tool because the laws that we have allow you to deploy the military in support of the police. And that is what citizens want. If there's a flare-up of crime or violence in a given community or area, they want saturation. They want to see law enforcement there in numbers, and they feel more secure, and the police must do their work. Soldiers are not policemen. They don't have powers of arrest. They're not trained in investigating crime. They're not trained in preparing cases for prosecution. So if you have a crime and violence problem, the solution to it is not a military solution. It is partly a policing solution and training your police well, equipping them well, and ensuring that between them and the prosecutors that take cases to court, there's a good relationship and the cases are properly prepared so that we can hold criminals accountable and then the courts can do their job and punish them appropriately. But the other side of it, which is vital, is why are so many youngsters turning to crime? And what are we going to do about that? Because as you take them out of the system, one way or another, more come in. So we had a thing called Unite for Change, a program, which is essentially a holistic response to trying to look at youth who are vulnerable to going down the wrong path and giving them new opportunities, new training, mentorship, and a stipend to get into a little business, readying them for the world of work, teaching them life skills and so on, trying to say this is a pathway to being a productive citizen rather than somebody who's going to terrorize the country and be part of the problem. And I believe that was a useful program and was delivering results. We also had a thing called the Peace Management Initiative. And how that worked was people in the community who had respect, especially men who, some of them may have been involved in things once upon a time, but they were more mature now and they wanted to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. They would be trained and they would be deployed to manage the issue if there's an issue on the ground and try and diffuse it. Because a lot of the problems in Jamaica are reactions to other things. So an incident occurs, something relatively trivial, but somebody feels disrespected and an issue happens. It might be a fight, it might be something. And next thing you know, somebody reacts in a more extreme way and then you have a murder, and then that spawns another thing, and that, and you have a series of reprisals, and that can go on for years. So the Peace Management Initiative was using community activists in this era to nip those problems in the bud and prevent them from escalating out of control. But of course, it needs to be properly organized, and it needs some funding behind it, because if the man them can buy a drink at a meeting and, you know, make the people them feel nice after the meeting and seal up the thing and everybody go and feel justified, nothing really happen. You know, you can't really achieve progress without some resources. So our approach to the crime and violence problem is multifaceted. We think it's a more balanced approach. Yes, we're going to be going hard after the violence producers of the country. We're going to bring a law in that allows them to be taken out under supervision of the court while a case is built, if there's credible intelligence to show that they are a danger to the society. And, you know, so we're more a spear fishing approach rather than the net fishing of the state of emergency, where you scrape up a whole heap of youth and take them out, and they're mixed up with criminals and things, and lose them work because they haven't been able to go to work, and eventually they're released because you can't hold them indefinitely. And, you know, they have a bitter feeling about that experience. It may have impacted them by giving them the taint of having been held in detention for a long time, and they end up, you know, and the state of emergency don't result in weapons being found or people being prosecuted. So it's not a sustainable method of dealing with the crime and violence problem. So we have a different approach there. In terms of the wider economic picture, as I've said, I think the macroeconomic management in Jamaica is sound. The governments understand the importance of basically trying to maintain your financial situation so you don't go into heavy debt and that kind of thing. But where are we going to get the decent jobs from? Right now, the economy is very dependent on tourism, and tourism is an important industry for Jamaica. But the reality is that although the Minister of Tourism likes to say, oh, we are going to have over 4 billion of earnings this year and how well it's going, the actual retention of that money in the society is very, very small relative to that big number. Very small. And that is because a lot of the hotel industry is owned by non-Jamaicans, and a lot of the money that is earned never comes to Jamaica. All what comes to Jamaica is what's needed just to pay the workforce, and the salaries for many of the staff are not very good. I'm not trying not to be too flowery in my speech, but it's a relatively low-income industry for the average worker, and some amount of local purchasing. But we have to deepen the integration of tourism into the local economy. We have to we need commitments from investors to support the local economy as best they can, and the state needs to get behind that process more, so that farmers and others can supply as much as possible to the hotel industry, and as much of the money stays in. And also this enclave system of hotels, the all-inclusive model, where people come to Jamaica, they don't leave the hotel, or if they do leave the hotel, it's under very, sterilized conditions to go to a specific place, and they can't just go out and feel the vibes of the place and know the real Jamaica, how Jamaica nice. They can't do that. So we need to encourage a more balanced model. We need more of the other type of tourism that exists in other islands in the Caribbean, where people, European plan as they call it, where basically you pay for your room, but everything else you pay separately, and you go out and eat in restaurants and buy cane from the cane man and soup from the soup man and jelly from the jelly man, and you go to a liquor session or dance and feel, we need that. We need our tourists to go out into the country and enjoy Jamaica. And the truth is that violence against, thank God, we have a decent track record in Jamaica, and tourists are not at risk in Jamaica. I think you can say that, because there's nothing to suggest otherwise, And so that is an important activity. The cultural and creative industries, the entertainment sector, is another vital part of the solution to our problems. We are we punch above our weight as a nation in this area, whether it be in, and I'm looking at that broadly, whether you're talking about sports, or you're talking about music, or you're talking about cuisine, or you're talking about fashion, even the Jamaican language. When enough of us fight against and feel that it's not a real language and so on. Plenty of people who don't come from Jamaica rate our language and want to learn it. Yeah. Because our language is very expressive. I mean, we can set things away where, nobody else can say it like that. So we must embrace our culture and elevate it and don't feel that it's any less than any other culture. And even the school system, I'm here to tell you. No, I'm not one of these people who say that we should abandon English, proper English. No, that is not realistic. But we must recognize that in some communities, English is not the first language of the children. It isn't. The Jamaican language has its own grammar. It has some of its own vocabulary. It borrows a lot of other vocabulary from English and other places. But if you grow up in a household and in a community where you're speaking Jamaican, you're fluent in Jamaican as a picnic, and you go into a school system which assumes that you're fluent in English, and there's no recognition or adjustment to ensure that you learn English to be comfortable in it so that you can learn other subjects, you're at a huge disadvantage. And that, I think, is one of the problems why we have these poor results in the primary school system. So we need to recognize that. And the teachers need to use the Jamaican language to make our children fluent in English. Yeah. And there have been studies on this at University of West Indies, at the Jamaican language unit. There was a pilot program run to try and do this, and I'm told the results were quite successful, but it has never been rolled out, it's never been expanded. That needs to happen as well. Yes, that's right. And Jamaica is also blessed with our geographic location. That's right. We are on a major trade route, one of the major world trade routes, because the shipping that comes through the Panama Canal passes Jamaica. And there is tremendous opportunity for Jamaica to provide goods and services to international trade and be linked in with the global supply chain so that ships can come and bring goods to Jamaica which can be taken to the next level of assembly, for example, where ship services can be provided to ships and to crew, and where logistics is part of what we do well. And we have a plan for that. It was a plan that was funded by a development partner, the UN, one of the UN agencies, the IDB, I can't remember which one exactly. It was an expensive plan, but it was a plan that showed how we can really become part of the global supply chain in a much more integrated way and be involved in global trade in a more integrated way. And that will also help to really lift the standard of living by creating very good jobs. We've had an investment, for example, I don't know how recently you visited, but there is a floating dry dock in the harbour, in the Kingston Harbour now, near Harbour Head, up by Harbour View, where it sinks and a ship can go on it, and then it just raises it up, and you can work on the ship's hull and on the ship. And this is fairly big ships, so that is the kind of thing we need to encourage. We have the Caribbean Maritime University, excellent, and has very good training programs and practical programs around things like warehouse management, ships, working on ships, etc., etc. That is an area where Jamaica needs to put a lot of focus, because I think we can help to take up. Right now, our GDP per capita, which it's another one of these metrics, which essentially says, look at the size of your economy, divide it by the number of people in your society, and you get how much wealth essentially each Jamaican on average has. It's around 7,000 US. Now, Barbados and Trinidad is all 20,000 US. Bahamas too. So we are way behind, and we need to move up that fast. To get to that level, in 15 years, we'll have to... To get to that level in 15 years, we have to grow at nearly 7% per annum. Right now, we are growing at around 1%. In fact, right now, we're having negative growth because of what happened with burial and so on. But even before, for the first 6 months, our growth was about less than 1% for the first 6 months of this year. After all the sacrifices that have been made, that's tragic. We have to turn that around. So these are some of the things that I think are important, some of the opportunities that exist. And of course, governance is another big thing. You know, the country needs leaders who have the trust and confidence, earn the trust and confidence of the people who put them there. You know? Yeah. Because if the people have a perception and an understanding of their leaders, that their leaders are really not about building the country and helping them to move forward in life, but have their own agenda, which is a personal agenda of enriching themselves and their friends, the country can't go nowhere. That is not going to take us forward. Yeah. And that is one of the real issues that is going to be confronting the electorate of the country when they next go to the polls. And I believe the Jamaican people will make the right decision. So the party, as I said, has really seen the need to increase our engagement with the Jamaican family outside of Jamaica. Why? Because I don't really see Jamaica just as a physical construct, an island of 145 miles long and 2.7. No, Jamaica is the culture of the people who regard Jamaica as home and who identify themselves as Jamaican. And that's really our greatest asset. But we are not, although attempts have been made, we are not successfully, I think, leveraging that, making full use and getting the full benefit of what the Jamaican family around the world can do for the development of Jamaica. So, I think you have to walk the walk first. So what we did was we amended our party constitution to recognize Jamaicans outside of Jamaica as a region. Because previously, to be a member of the PNP, you had to be on the Jamaican voters list, which means theoretically, you have to have an address there, right? But we've expanded that and changed that so that any Jamaican citizen, anybody who's a Jamaican citizen, can be a member of the party. And we created a new region, the 7th region. Jamaica is divided into 6 regions in our party. Region 7 is the Diaspora region. And they have voting rights, they choose the leader, they can vote me out, and they can do whatever they want to do. They have voting rights in the party. So, and when we get into government, I want to really try and find ways in which people who wish to serve in the country, who have experience and skills and knowledge that can help us to grow and help us to develop, can be encouraged to do so. I know that there are all sorts of annoying and frustrating barriers when people, for example, want to do good by sending things home. The costs that you have to incur to clear things that are not for you and your family, but are for a school or for a community, is frustrating. We need to deal with those things and eliminate those things. Also, we have many public boards in the country. When I say public boards, important agencies of government which have boards of directors that guide and provide oversight. All sorts of National Housing Trust, Port Authority, the Heart Trust, many. I've just named 3 big ones, but there are, maybe 100. We need to encourage diaspora persons to become members of those boards. There's no reason with modern technology why you can't play that role, even if you're not physically in the country at the time. So this is something that we will be encouraging people to do when we come to government. And we can talk a bit more about the constitutional side of things, which is, another issue, and I don't want to get into that. I'll respond to that if it's asked as a question.